But I want to go on from that to talk about misconceptions about male headship in the scriptures, because I think there are some serious misconceptions
very
there.
helpful.
And number one is this: husbands are never commanded to rule their wives.
Oh, can we just pause?
But to love them.
Yes.
Husband, did you come on, let's write it down.
Yeah.
Husbands are never
never commanded to rule their wives. Okay? So the Bible never says, take steps to ensure your wives submit to you, husbands.
It never says that.
It never says that.
Take step, do not take step.
Yeah.
Neither does it say husbands exercise headship and authority over your wives.
Oh, come on! Now we're shooting some holy cows.
Rework our brains.
But that means that we cannot just sweep to one side the whole concept of headship.
Correct.
Because
Come on.
that is there in the text
Come on. Yes.
and there in Scripture. But let me say about a second misunderstanding here, is that headship is never portrayed in the Bible as a reason for self-satisfaction or for self-exaltation.
Oh.
And husbands pervert their role if they use headship as a justification for how they behave within the family. And I think when that happens, then they use it to satisfy their own thirst for power,
Ego.
for authority, their ego.
Yeah.
And you know the simple meaning of ego, E-G-O, edging God out. And if you are a slave of your ego, you have edged God out of your family and of your marriage.
Yeah.
And headship is not the power of a superior over an inferior.
We just need a sailor right there.
You just sit in that, couldn't you?
Yes.
So, I mean, very practically speaking, we're talking about there are many marriages I know in the Christian world where it is assumed that this passage in Ephesians means that when there is a decision to be taken, that ultimately the husband, the male in the relationship, is the deciding vote. There are two people voting, and the deciding vote, if there's not complete agreement, is one person, which is no vote at all.
I don't think legitimately we've ever hit that.
Can I just come in here and
Yes.
read this very short...
That silence was me thinking, it wasn't me disagreeing.
But I think in all of that, let me resolve that thought and then we'll come back to it. But the thought of that is that, in the mutual celebration of each other, where ego has gone, in the mutual yielding to each other's strengths, we understand who is in the best place, who's got the greatest insight, who's got the greatest wisdom about that particular situation we might be facing. So it's this yielding back and forth to strength that comes out. And actually sometimes there's a sense of, well, I so want to empower you that I'm not going to, there's no disagreement because I'm going to let that one go.
Yeah, hear what Emma's saying there. We're not talking about we have some sort of utopian marriage where we automatically agree on every issue. If you think that is the case, then, please continue to believe that. But let me reveal behind the curtain. Of course, it's not like that. We have differing opinions on things. So that is when this concept that is helpful in Scripture, we are submitting to one another. Now, it may take a couple of days to get to the place where if we are disagreeing on something and I have to submit my thought on it, Emma has to submit my thought, and then eventually we say, actually, who in this is...
Who's got the wisdom of Christ on this, or who's got the history here that actually informs this decision?
Now, what we've found in practice is that actually, whoever had the instant one way slowly comes round, and whoever was slower to come to the thing finds it. And we actually find that after whatever period of time we come to that place.
I don't think there's not a disagreement I can think of that's not been fairly easily resolved. actually in that because love conquers. Keep going, Dad. You're on a kind of machine gun roll.
Okay.
Yes.
This is a little incident that I read about, recorded in a Christian magazine for this month, October 2023. And this lady writes a regular page in this magazine, and her pseudonym name is Imperfect Mum. Okay? And she writes it like this, describing an event in her family life. I was at the dinner table with my 2 youngest boys. An unopened Amazon parcel sitting on the table. The chat went like this. Younger child. Whose Amazon parcel is that, Mum? Mum replies, me. What is it? A Kindle. I've wanted one for years. Did you ask Dad's permission? No. Did I need to? Yes. Why? Silence. Older teen interjects. Mum doesn't have to. She earns her own money. Me, meaning the woman, if I had told you it was Dad's Kindle, would you have asked if he got my permission to buy one? Younger child, no. Me, the woman, why not? No reply. As it happens, we do actually discuss things. My husband knew I was planning to buy a Kindle once I'd found a bargain. But he had said, look, we can't really afford it right now. And they came to some agreement over it. Her conclusion of that little family scenario was that she had inadvertently brought the boys up over the last decade in an insidiously patriarchal environment in which the men ruled the women at home and she had little freedom in the decision making. And what I think about patriarchy is that it has got its way insidiously and wormed its way into our thinking.
Yes.
And it comes out in a Christian family where they're wanting to honour the Lord in all their family activities, and yet it suddenly springs out like that, and you realise that it is far more difficult to deal with than we initially think so.
If I push the money conversation, and then we'll come back to your thoughts on how we work with the concept of headship, because we do need to keep pushing that conversation. But let me just comment on the finances. When you and I are doing marriage preparation or marriage counselling, we often coach people to say our highest and best thought is you shut down every single bank account that you have in your own name, and you only ever have joint accounts. And normally, apart from some of the conversations about sexuality and physical intimacy, normally that gets the most horrified response. But it's mine. And we say, no. It is your pooled, shared gift of God resourcing this covenant. You never get to say in marriage, mine. It's just not a marriage concept.
I earned more and therefore I have more right of access.
And we understand
You're
that
submitting.
in ours, this is ours as a gift of God, the provider, that maybe one day you earn more, I earn more. And actually in our lives, it goes back and forth. It's gone back and forth and back and forth, you know, depending what careers we had at different points in our lives. But it's always been ours before and from a God who is the provider. All belongs to him. So there is never, ever any conversation either between us or heard by the children of mine. It's just not a covenantal concept. Sorry, go back.
And I think headship, going on from that, Emma, it is more a responsibility than a right.
Yes.
That's good.
So
And that's important. It's more a responsibility than a right. A right is something that you and I demand, or we insist upon it, that it's something that we should get and should have.
Yes.
But if that spirit reigns in a home, then you've got a spirit of authoritarianism there. And that makes for a very unhappy atmosphere in the home when that's manifested there. I think how it ought to be looked upon, headship, whatever we end up in trying to make out a pattern as to what it actually is, it should be viewed as a sacred trust from God.
Wow.
A sacred
trust from God.
A sacred trust from God.
Yeah.
You know, and I think part of that means that the husband does often set the tone and the mood for a home. Mm-hmm. And he can radically change that mood of a home and that tone of a home by seeing his headship as a sacred trust from God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.